Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, frequent flyers. Thank you for joining us today in the lounge. Today, we're going to be talking about daring to relate and really diving into understanding the impact that you can have as a leader. Today's quote is by Scott Heiferman. If you can connect people, you can create the future. Now, Cheryl and I connected through heroic public speaking. And so we're both avid speakers, and we both share a passion for working in the mental health space and helping people really be able to connect on deeper levels. Cheryl has had an incredible career and really pioneered and trailblazed the way for other women. And she did not take no for an answer. She faced many obstacles, but as we know from Marcus Aurelius, the obstacle is the way. And she carved out her own path, which allowed her to be the first woman and military spouse chairman of the VA Board of Veterans Appeals. Today, as a speaker and catalyst leader, Cheryl is sharing her stories on perseverance and viewing these obstacles as simply stepping stones. Cheryl, or Cherie, as I should say, thank you for being here with me today in the lounge.
Thanks, Sarah. It's great to be here. It's great to see you.
Yeah, it's great to see you too. It's been a few months since we first connected,
Yeah.
and many things have happened since then. You've had a TED Talk. We've had so many different things going on in our lives, and so I'm really excited that we get to dive in today and really put the meat on the bones of some very important topics, because there is still this kind of feeling of separation between leadership and the core employees. And I know that you've done a lot of work in this area, so I'm really excited to have you here to help us dive in. I want to start by asking you to tell us a little bit more about your book, Dare to Relate. How did you come up with the concept? What drove you to write this book? And just give us a little bit more of the backstory there.
Sure. So Dare to Relate really came out of when I was getting ready to retire from my job in the federal government. Everybody was asking, "What are you going to do? What do you want to think you want to do?" And I'm like, I don't know. I'm going to retire. I'm going to take a break, right? And several people said, "You need to write a book." And I said, "Well, I don't know. Writing a book, that seems really daunting, outside my comfort zone. Besides, there's a 1,000,001 leadership books." And they said, "Yeah, but not in your voice." And not with your story. And I said, "Oh, well, let me think about it." And so I started listening. I really started listening and reading. I listened to different podcasts. I was a guest on a couple of podcasts. I was reading a lot of articles. And as you noted at the beginning, what I heard and saw was that widening gap between leaders and employees. And, I was like, this, it shouldn't be this way. I mean, that's not what I experienced as well. It's what I experienced as an employee. And that's why I led the way I led. Right. And so it became the book that not necessarily that I wanted to write, but that I had to write, because I really felt that the information was important for people to hear.
Yeah.
And so I wrote it. So took some time. I'd moved down here. We'd moved down here to North Carolina, and it was a much quieter atmosphere than being in DC. So
I bet,
had some time to focus and write. And Dare to Relate, Leading with a Fierce Heart is really about what drove me. It was my heart and understanding that people are. The impact and importance of people are the key to everything you do, quite frankly, but they are definitely the key to a leader's success.
Absolutely. Right. It's leaders influence, but they also inspire.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are not connecting, then it's very difficult to inspire people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So tell us a little bit more about your origin story. I alluded to it a little bit in the intro, but I'd like to hear it from you on your journey through a traditionally male-dominated space, and what drove you to choose to set your eyes on this work.
So really the origin story begins when I was a little girl, like little tiny girl. When I was 4 years old, my father died by suicide, and he was a World War II Navy veteran. And I grew up in Appalachia, the foothills of Appalachia in Southern Ohio. And it was my widowed mother who raised me, and she was the first to go to college. of the family, and she was a badass, quite frankly, if I can say that.
You can.
And um, you know, what we experienced was all of a sudden people who we'd known for a long time, who she and my father had known, they started excluding us and treating
Mm,
us differently and pushing us aside, and it was like they were trying to make us invisible because they were uncomfortable.
right.
And because mental health and suicide in the 60s, late 60s and 70s was just not, I mean, it's much better today, but we still have a way to go. But back then it was much harder. Um, and so, but what happened was it was the veteran community that kind of came alongside and supported us.
Mm.
And they were always there for us. I spent many a Friday night having a Shirley Temple at the American Legion.
Yeah.
With my mom, and then I'd go home with friends, and she'd come when she was finished, hanging out with the evening. So, it was that community, and so all along there was some support, and she was, of course, a dominant supporter. She basically told me I have to stand on my own 2 feet to be able to take care of myself, and you never let anyone make you invisible.
Mm.
And so she taught me that. And so I went forward and married my husband, who happened to be in the Air Force, and then became a military spouse at a time when military spouses weren't supposed to have a career or even want one, or
Mm.
let alone have a job. And I was already in law school, so that wasn't going to work well. So I basically carved my own path, and figured out that I could have a job, and I could have a career, and I could support my husband and have a family. And so I did those things. And now, was it an easy path? No. Was I forging my own many times? Yes. But I did have a support network who were there and helped. And then when I stepped into leadership, what I didn't realize until later was that I led differently than
Mm.
other people around me. And um, when people said, why, how are you successful? Why, how are you doing what you're doing? Why? And I would kind of look around, and I'm like, well, here's what I do. And they're like, well, what do you mean? You talk to and relate to your people? You don't just talk to you? And I'm like, no, like I know something about them. We have conversations about life,
Right.
beyond work. And if life happens, I'm like, okay, that's life. We'll work through it. Right. And I was a little different. Because I had come through my life journey to understand the importance of impact of people.
Yeah.
And so that's what led me to that. And then, when I stepped into a senior leadership role and eventually became a political appointee, I still led that way. And people told me I was doing it wrong, but I somehow don't think so.
Yeah. I love that. And it's a subjective experience anyways, right? And so we're not all going to be the same, in different situations, different seasons, different companies, different cultures will require different styles and leadership. But at the core of it all, we are still human beings, and
We are.
humans connect through story, and we crave connection, right? Loneliness is actually, the number one silent killer epidemic that's happening right now. And it's kind of interesting that, especially in North America, but certainly in Western society, hyper individualism is celebrated and, pushed down our throats of like, this is the way it should be. But it's very, on the back end, it's super hollow because then we don't have that community. We don't have the support network. And when we're facing obstacle after obstacle, that's when we need the support network and, the guidance of multiple people to be able to help give us new perspectives.
Mhm. Absolutely. I mean, that's key. When as human beings, we want to know that we have purpose and that we matter, and that we matter to each other. And one of the things I saw with my employees, I felt this as an employee, I saw this with my employees, and I still see it today, is that, you know, employees want to be seen, valued, and heard. And they want to know that leadership sees them, hears them, and values them. But they also want to know that that leader is a human being, just like them, has the same
Yeah,
challenges.
absolutely. And because when we see people and we understand that they have the same challenges, right? It's not like we've put them on a pedestal and made it out that their circumstances are different. But when we really understand, hey, that person's like me and they're getting through it, I can too, right?
Right.
It's like very permission giving to be
Mhm.
able to witness other people make bold choices and have responsibility for how they show up or the actions they take, because then it allows us to look at ourselves and see what's possible also.
Yeah,
Yeah. Now,
exactly.
sometimes though, people don't like looking in that mirror, right? Because maybe they're not doing those things, and it can be quite confronting when they don't. And then they're like faced with the reality of, oh, I can change things. I do have power to change my circumstances.
Mhm.
I would rather be a victim and have the convenient excuse, right? And that's also something. I mean, I've been there myself. I'm
Mhm.
not even pointing fingers here. Like I've totally done that and then
Yes.
realized, oh, that was just my convenient excuse,
Yeah.
right? It was just my story that I was living in.
One of my favorite quotes, and I think it's in the book. I can't remember now, but I think it's in there. I'm pretty sure it's in there. Is from because it's one of my favorites. Is from John Maxwell, and he's a prolific writer about leadership,
Yeah.
and one of the things he says is the leader's attitude is like the thermostat for the place she works.
Mm,
So I often ask people, what's the temperature of your workplace?
I like that. What's the temperature of your workplace? I'm going to pop that up on there for everyone. And what kind of responses are you getting with that question?
It's interesting because people kind of pause for a minute and they don't know how to answer that.
Yeah.
They're like, well, is it hot? Is it supposed to be hot? Is it supposed to be cold? I don't know.
Right.
And
What
I'm like,
season is
well,
it?
I guess the question is, what do you as the leader want it to be? Right?
Yeah.
Because if you're not projecting that and you're not encouraging that, then it's going to be whatever yours is. Because
Yes.
your employees are going to follow your example and take note, right?
Right. Going to follow
So,
your cues.
right. So one of the things I did when we were still in person prior to the pandemic was I started walking around and engaging with the
Mm.
people. We had 5 floors, so I'd carve time on the schedule and walk around. When I first started doing it, people were looking at me like, "What are you doing here? Why,
Yeah. I'm annoyed almost, right? Like, why
why,
are you
like,
picking up?
why are you here? You're checking on me. You're checking." And I had people come up to me and say, "You're checking on me," and I said, "I'm not checking on you. I'm here to check in with you. I want to give you the opportunity to engage with me and talk with me. If you're too busy, that's okay. That's fine. I don't, if you're in the middle of something, let's go do, right? Excuse me. But I want to be available and approachable because I knew from experience that if I just stayed in my office, in my ivory tower and hid
Yeah.
there, right? Or I walked around and I was moving so fast. I had an entourage of people with me that people didn't feel like that people would feel like I wasn't engaged. And so, it was really funny. One morning, I was out and we had it was DC. So it was, we had an early crew that came to work. And so I got in pretty early too. And so it was about 6:30 one morning. And I was walking one of the floors that I knew where my early team, was in and kind of checking in with people. Hey, how you doing today? And I got this text because I had my phone with me, and my executive assistant's like, "Where are you?" I said, "I'm on the second floor," and she's like, "Okay." She said, "Figured." Yeah, that's because they couldn't. They're like, "Yeah, she's walking the floor again." But
Yeah.
but it made a difference, and people started to look forward to it, right? So
Mm.
so they would start to ask me or send notes and say, "Hey, when's the chairman coming on the floor again? When's she going to be back by?" And so what it did is it encouraged people to connect with me, and I formed relationships, and out of that came a lot of great ideas.
I love that. And it's often in the beginning whenever something is new, right? Whether we
Mhm.
want the thing or we like the thing, we're still going to question it because it's
Right.
new, right?
Yeah.
So that's a
Mhm.
natural human response. It doesn't mean that it's wrong or not the right thing. It's just people are getting used to, oh, she's interested, right? And it's kind of like I always bring like little kid examples into the workplace because it's so true. If you think about children, when a parent is really absent or maybe working a lot or on the phone a lot, when they finally do re-engage, there's a bit of distrust. There's like, what do you want from me? Or like, is this going to last, or is this just for 5 minutes? Right. And so there, we need to take our time if it's not something that we've always done, or particularly if we're recovering from, this real lack of connection,
Right.
to just be persistent and showcase like, no, I mean it. I'm here. This is not a box tick. This is not just to look good or to
Mhm.
intimidate. This
Right.
is really because I want to hear from you and I want to connect with you.
Yeah. And so I continued to do it. And then when we went out on the pandemic, I had to adjust a little bit. At
Yeah,
first it
so how
was,
did you do that? How did you make sure you maintain connection when, you're through a computer screen and obviously everybody's in separate places?
yeah, it was hard. One of the things I heard, at first we're going to be out for just a few weeks, and
Of
yeah,
course, yeah.
weeks went into months. And so we got to the end. We got somewhere around 2 months, and I started hearing, chatter through the room, because I did have feelers out, kind of seeing how people were feeling and adjusting, and they were like, "Oh, the leaders don't care that my life has changed, and it's
Mm,
hard, and they're just doing whatever." And so I was like, "Oh no, we gotta figure out something." And so one of the things, we had teams, right? And so if you have teams and somebody's green, that means they're available.
okay,
Well, maybe,
right,
because it's the same reaction about when the boss comes working through your workspace. You
right.
might be available, but you might be working, right?
Yeah.
And so one time I reached out to this person, and I said, "Hey, are you available?" And she came back and she's like, "Yes, of course, ma'am. What do you need?" And I'm like, "No. Is it a good time?" And she's like, "No, it's fine." And so I said, "Look, I just wanted to check on you." And she said, "Well, my daughter's here and I'm doing teaching, so I'm kind of distracted." I said, "That's fine." I said, "Don't worry." And so I said, "We'll schedule a different time." What I learned from that was, just like, occasionally I would give people a heads up before I came down on the floor, like, "Hey, I'm going to be on floor 3 next week or something, on this day." I did the same thing. I would send a note, or I would say, "Hey, I'm going to be, check in. I'll send you an email first to see if it's a convenient time." Because I understood that life had turned upside down. They had kids at home, they were teaching, they were taking care of loved ones. Life was
Yeah.
different than in the workplace, and they were at home, right? And not everybody, it took some people time to set up all this, right? We've learned all
Right.
this, but
Yeah.
we didn't all have that, right?
No.
And so, it might not be a good time because their spouse might be in the kitchen, and that's where they're, having their meetings, or that's where their
Yeah.
computer is. so so I did that. Well, then out of that came some suggestions. Excuse me a minute.
No problem.
And so I said, "What should we do? Office hours, town halls,
Mm,
where we talked about life, not work, life." It was
yeah.
different. And people were like, "Wait, we can do this?"
Yeah, I think it took, and even some people now almost have still a bit of a discomfort with it, but to be honest, they're not separate, right? We might have a slightly different persona, of course, because you have different energy as a mother versus as the leader of an organization, or as a father versus, going to, do whatever it is that you're doing at work, or when you're the athlete on the field versus a colleague, right? We have these different kind of ways of being, but ultimately we're still the same.
Mm-hmm.
And so the way that we approach our everything impacts the other. And obviously, we spend so much time at work that
Right.
we need to be able to integrate better so that we can process, so that we can then also be present when we're in the office, focused, doing our job. And then when we go home, we're doing the same level of focus and attention to our families and to ourselves so that we can continue. So many people forgot about that part for many years. I think,
Mm-hmm.
COVID was the great accelerator in many ways for humanizing the workplace again.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think a couple of things. Like, one of the things that couple of my employees said to me, and then I also heard this and read about it in various articles. towards as the pandemic was waning a little bit was that people felt that they were seen as people when they were in the virtual world because people could see life around them.
Right.
And I found that just, amazing because I'm like, wait, you're actually being seen as a person in the virtual world as
Right.
opposed to
It's kind of
right, but
it's
they
kind
could
of
see that they were a person with a whole life, right? It wasn't
yes.
like they kept that life secret anymore, right?
Yeah.
Because you have me like, you know, hopefully the dogs won't bark while I'm on today, but they could.
Right. Yeah. Oh,
you
my
know,
dog's been kinda moving around a
yeah,
little bit. I'm like looking out of the corner of my eye like, "Sweetheart, it's time to just, like, chill right now, right?"
so
But it's
yeah,
totally
so
fine.
but that's the other piece. You noted that the pandemic kind of accelerated the feeling of what work is supposed to be and humanizing it, as you said. So
Yeah.
one of the things I talk about in the book and I talk about when I speak is that what employees have figured out, and this is regardless of generation. Leaders want to say, "Oh, it's the millennials and the Gen Zs." It's not.
Yeah.
It's that acceleration of the pandemic that taught us and showed us that life is about living, that work is a part of that,
Right.
and that work should enhance and fulfill that, not dominate it. And like you
Mm.
said, we had lost track of that. But particularly employees today are redefining what
Yeah.
professional and personal success looks like. And so they're not willing to say, I'm going to work a 60-hour week anymore
Yeah.
because I don't want that. I want to be able to have, do my work, but still be a person at work. And then, when I shift to home, I can be, I can be mom, dad, wife, husband, whatever my role is, daughter, son.
Yeah.
But, there might be work sometimes that enters your mind in that world because
Right.
that's what happens,
Yeah.
right? And that's okay, but you can't compartmentalize it. And like one of the things I say is we don't hang up our person when we walk in the door of the workplace. We don't.
Mm.
We're still human beings, and we
I love
we don't have
that.
a choice.
We don't hang up our person. Yes.
Yeah, it's not like a coat that we take off.
That is a great, great quote, because, yeah, it's a very visual kind of thing, and I feel that, we have more compassion for life happening, whereas, before it would be a nuisance or bothersome or frustrating or, "Well, I'll get someone else," and it's just remembering that person has a life, so do you. You wanna get home and have to see your kids at soccer practice or be with your partner and have a meal together. Well, so does that person, right? Um, and
Yeah,
that's important for us to, again, relate to and connect on because that's the vulnerability in action. And
right.
that I truly believe that when you get that at work, you have much more loyal employees.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. People, in fact, Gallup did a study, and I won't run off all the data because I don't have it memorized yet, but I'm working on it. But one of Gallup's studies is like, look, people are 5 times when they feel supported, like their organizations and leaders care for them. They're 5 times more likely to stay and to say that they recommend their organization as the place to work.
Mm,
Right. That's a big deal because that's what you want. You want your employees and your customers and your stakeholders can be your best ambassadors for your
oh,
organization,
absolutely.
right? And that's what you want.
Yeah. I mean, it's either very good news or very bad news, right? It's either people complaining, until they're blue in the face and saying how bad it is,
Right.
or it's like the most amazing place ever. And you're like, is this a cult? Because you guys are all in love with this place, but like maybe I kind of want to try, because it seems incredible.
Yeah.
And they absolutely can be your best ambassadors.
Yeah.
Have you
And
seen the show? Sorry.
they can recruit for you too.
Oh, absolutely, right, and I believe that Tesla has, a Tesla and SpaceX have a referral program, so if an employee recommends you and you have an interview and you end up getting hired, they'll actually get a bonus for
Mm,
you joining the team because it's saved the company money
yeah.
and having to spend all this time to go and recruit and advertise and do all of these things and be, especially if you're a good employee and you're having good reviews and good rapport, that kind of recommendation and referral is powerful. It's worth its weight in gold. I will take a recommended contact from someone in my network
Mm-hmm.
over the most beautiful, pristine CV I've ever seen in my life any
Mm-hmm.
day.
Yeah.
Because you can make yourself look good on paper, but maybe in reality you don't live up to that. You don't own things. Maybe you present really well, but you are not like there for longevity. There's so many different factors. So to have that
Yes.
personal recommendation is so powerful.
Yes.
I have a comment here from someone who's watching saying, totally agree that 60 to 80-hour work weeks as a salaried employee is tough on the families. Yeah,
Yeah. It
absolutely. And
is.
not just tough on the families, tough on you,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's we have our own systems that we need to take care of. And if we're not sleeping, I mean, the latest sleep research is outrageous. The latest sleep research is showing that if you're only sleeping 6 hours a night and you do that for 10 nights in a row, you might as well be drunk when you're at work.
Mm.
Because your
Wow.
cognitive function, your cognitive function and your attention span and all of these things, your executive, skills are way down, and it's your system for all intents and purposes. It's like it's been up for 24 hours straight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And,
And so we're now getting the science to back up what we've known for many years, right?
mm-hmm.
But it's also like, we hear these things. I work well under pressure. I mean, I used to say this all the time too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I
We do.
actually work better under pressure, you know. Um, but you're just addicted to stress.
Yeah.
That's the plain and simple language. It's not
Mm-hmm.
actually you working better. It's that you've found a way to survive in those environments. But imagine that we're actually sleeping and we have people who are excited to come to work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Apathy is actually the biggest killer to organizational culture.
Yes.
Because once people check out, they don't care if the clients are happy. They don't care. Look at Boeing right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's
I mean,
a little bit
I
of
don't
that
need to
going
say
on.
I don't need to say anything else, right?
It's hard because when you have employees who are checked out, or who, sometimes you have employees who are like, well, we'll just see how this works, if this is
Right.
really going to be, and that's okay. That's okay. They're entitled to think that way because it's different, right? But then when things start happening and it does start changing, and there's a vibrancy, it catches on. I mean, one of the I worked in the VA, of course, in the Veterans Department of Veterans Affairs, and so it can be very challenging work. I mean, our veterans go through a lot, and so do their families, and so when you're reading some of this information, you can't forget that they're a person just like you, right?
Yeah.
And so that was one of the things I always tried to bring home to my employees, was like, look, you are making a difference in this person's life, just like, your colleague who did something for you or supported you made in your life, right? And so then when we started hearing from our customers, from veterans, or from our veteran service organizations, about perceived changes that they were feeling and seeing, and I could bring that feedback back to the employees and say, hey, guess what? This is what you're doing. This is what I'm hearing when I'm out, interacting with these organizations and groups, or even, talking to the senators and congressmen. It was a big confidence builder, because they're like, hey,
Yeah.
I'm making a difference. I'm doing something. And anytime you can do that, you're building people back up. And that was one of the things that I walked into in the organization as the chief executive. The organization, the employee morale and the self-confidence was, through the floor. It was bad.
And when it's so bad like that, how do you handle the stories, that the perceived perception
Yeah.
of what might be going on, and how do you tackle that for those that might be listening who are in a similar situation?
What I did really is I started day one. I started on day one, And, I came from within the organization. So literally I walked out the door as a senior executive and back in the door an hour later as the chief executive. And so I started saying, look, we're going to communicate. I'm going to tell you what's going on. I need to know what you're seeing, what you're hearing. I need to know what you need. I need to hear. And I'm going to listen. And that was part of the walking around was that listening piece. But your words and actions have to match.
Yeah.
If they don't, then you have a disconnect, right? And so if you have that disconnect, the employees are going to see it immediately. They're going to like,
absolutely.
not
just like
real.
kids. They're like,
like,
okay, that's not real. I'm going to still do what I want. You won't punish me.
Yeah. And so I think, making sure that your words and actions are in alignment and your intentions and behaviors are there too, because people pay attention to that. Like if you're walking around saying, yeah, I'm here engaged, but you're like looking off and doing something else or checking your phone or whatever, then you might be there, but you're not there.
Right.
And so that was one of the things I did. So of course, people tested that. Like, is this really the case? Is she really gonna, and so that was where I, when I would walk around and I would hear things and I would say, well, I think we need to try this because I heard this when I was walking around, and they'd be like, wait, I said that. She heard me say that. So it's my idea. She's going to implement that idea. Yes, we're going to implement that idea. So those were things you're able to do. Right. But it's hard. It's hard as a leader. And in my case, at the time I became the chief executive, we had 800 or 900 people. So, and some were in the office, some were teleworking, some were remote. And then we transitioned to fully remote. Right.
Right.
So, keeping that engagement with people, was hard, but it was a commitment to it from leadership. And I told my leaders I expected it from them too, because, the signal has to come from the top, but it has to be carried through. And that was one of the things I saw often as an employee was, as a leader, leaders would say and do certain things, but it wouldn't trickle down. You didn't get that when you were down here. And so I'm like, no, we're going to do it down here. And that was one of the things, people often ask me, well, like, by walking around, weren't you undermining your senior executives? And I'm like, no, because they should have been, they should be walking around too and engaging, and they were. But I said, no, because we were hearing stuff and we were learning. Right. And so then I would bring things back and say, hey, did you hear this? Or have you heard about this? Or did you know about this? If they didn't, then we had some work to do, because they should know. Right. So am I undermining? No, I'm just teaching them a different style of leadership. Yeah.
No, that's great. It's very important that there is action and follow through. And it doesn't have to be that you took the action of what they requested. Exactly. It doesn't have to be the thing already implemented, but you need to communicate. So even if you cannot implement that thing, or, it's not going to work, you can share why, right? You can give that feedback so that people don't feel like what they're suggesting is going on deaf ears. And what you said there was so key. When employees are bought into an idea, or because it's part of they help to come up with it, they're going to buy in so much more easily, and they're going to help be advocates and allies to spread that message and be that positive force for change. And that's infectious, that's going to get people excited, and feeling like they have ownership and accountability. But it is very important, as you mentioned, that it does start with the leader, because if you can't see it, then you won't have a good model to follow.
Yeah, because, people, all of us, whether you're employee, leader, whatever you're doing, we all believe what we see and what we feel. That's what drives us. Let's think about that, right? It's hard if you can't see it and you can't feel it. Does it really exist? Maybe not. It depends on your personal belief system, right? But you believe it especially when you're dealing with leaders, when you've been through a lot of leaders and you felt abandoned and you felt unheard and unseen. When a different leader or a new leader comes in, it's normal to be like, okay, let's see what this is about, and let's see how this goes, and so when you start to see changes, you're like, is this really happening? Is this for real? Is this, is this, and so I think it can be infectious. But the other piece of that is also acknowledging the hard work and the effort of the people who work for you, and saying thank you, and honoring their work, and celebrating it beyond. But people go, well, I say thank you all the time. I'm like, well, okay, but do you specifically call out what they did? Because when you specifically call out what they did, they know that you know what they're doing. One, and that's a good thing, right? Hopefully. And two, it makes them feel like you're engaged with them, right? One of my favorite things is I had what we call a Kilroy Award that I gave for Above and Beyond. Like Kilroy was here. And so I would give it as a recognition of going above and beyond, whether it was a person, a team. I knew it was making a difference when people started taking selfies with Kilroy. Get on Facebook and see a selfie.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great.
My Kilroy was a little eagle. And but that was neat, right? That was something that they wanted. And then it was even better because people called and said, or emailed and said, hey, can I recommend somebody? I'm like, absolutely. Yes. Because that's peer recognition of they're doing a great job, but it's peer recognition that the leader supports. So you've got, you're building those blocks to help your organization be successful. And that's what it takes. Now, if you don't keep it up or you don't keep doing it, it'll tear down the box really fast.
Yeah, that's great insight. We like to be recognized. And when you can get specific, it shifts everything. And this goes not just for employee and employer relationships, but also your friendships, your romantic relationships, to specifically say thank you for something in particular, or specifically say what you're proud of them, or specifically highlight something. It's different than just being like, well, they know I love them. They know I care about them. Right. Because maybe they do. But if you get really granular like that, it activates something within us. And it's like, oh, they're paying attention. Right. And then you feel seen, and that makes you feel more connected. The bond becomes strengthened. And that is a powerful asset in all relationships, but certainly in the workplace. And it's a learned skill. I don't remember learning how to do these things when I was a kid. It was, and actually the golden rule I have beef with.
Yeah.
Treat others as you wish to be treated. No. Treat others as they wish to be treated.
Yeah. And you have to know what that is.
Right. And you can't assume, you can't make it up or think it's you, because if I go around treating everybody like I want to be treated, I'm going to annoy the heck out of some people. I'm going to be overbearing for some people. It's just so many people are going to have, some people will love it. It's going to just have a different reaction. Right. But we're not a blanket. This one rule works for everybody. I mean, I guess the only one rule that I would say that works is kindness. Right. So maybe you do have to give some feedback that's a little bit tough for the person to hear. You can do it kindly. You don't have to, backhand them in the face with it. Yeah. It's so fascinating hearing all the different stories and methodologies with my guests on how they approach these things.
And all those things we talked about, they go directly to the mental health of the person. Like you and I have talked about before. I mean, today's employees struggle a lot with burnout, with mental health, challenges because, they're working by themselves, or they don't feel appreciated, or, you could go down the list, right? How you treat people and how you engage with people, your family, your employees, people in the world that you interact with, it makes a difference.
It does. Absolutely. And the mental health piece, it's very difficult to conceive of how to relate to other people when you're feeling alone and different, and like you're the only one that's ever faced this struggle and problem. And isolation is the worst advisor.
It is.
You're going to have that. We all have it, the nasty inner critic up there,
Mhm.
and then we're just trapped in our own stories, and experience of what's going on rather than getting that objective feedback or reflection. Having the support of your peers, of mentors, of your immediate family, your partner, your children, your parents, like all of them come into play to really support you into feeling whole. Like even when you don't know what to do and everything is going wrong, it's okay.
Yeah.
You're going to figure it out. And
Yes.
it's very sad that a lot of people with burnout are then also going home alone, right?
Mhm.
They don't have family or they don't have a partner.
Mhm.
And that's worsening the situation and further creating isolation. And I
Yes.
know you and I are both very, very passionate about the mental health topic because
Mhm.
you know it's difficult. I mean, I'll say even for myself, I'm the strong one. I'm the resilient one. I can get through anything, right?
Mhm.
Burn something up. Okay, great. I'm the phoenix. I'm going to rise from it. It's still hard.
Mhm.
And you go around, if you go around trying to please other people by making sure they're not uncomfortable because you're having a big emotion or an experience, you're not able to fully process. And I did that for a long time. And it
Mhm.
really, but it was like, but I can't break down. I can't have those emotions because then who's going to be the strong one? Who's going to, um, and it then ties into perfectionism and all of
Mhm.
those things, right?
Yep.
And so the first step is just acknowledging that this
Yeah.
exists for you.
Yeah.
And from
Acknowledging
there,
and then figuring out how you support yourself and how you build your support
yeah,
system. Because, like you said, I dealt with that for many, many years. I hid from the fact that my father's died by suicide, and my brother,
yeah,
13 years later, died by suicide. Um, I was mad. I was, so I hid
mhm,
from it. And what happened is life happened, but basically we had several suicides occur in my son's high school.
mm,
And we had always talked about things within the family, the entire family. Everybody knew the history, but I realized that it was a bigger issue. And I found my voice rather than hiding from it, and then figuring out how I talked about it and where I talked about it, because I wasn't going to go to my son's high school and talk about
yeah,
it. He didn't need that kind of stuff. But the other part of that was letting people know that, look, I have gone through that, and I know what it looks like, and I know what you're feeling, and it's, and it impacts your entire life. It does.
absolutely.
It changes how you view things. At the same time, you also learn different ways of coping because of
Mm,
that. Um, you know, in like I said, in our family, we talk about stuff just because that's one of the ways of coping, because life can be challenging. We had another family member who struggled with some things when he was in his 40s, and we talked about it. And he called me and told me what he was going through, and said what he was going to do. And I said, yeah, I think that's a good plan. And let's, let me know how I can support you. And so, it's things like that, that letting other people know what's going on in your life and asking for that support. But like you said, also understanding that and acknowledging, yeah, I'm having a hard time here. And,
yeah,
um, I'm not trying to ask, I'm not trying to put that on you. I'm just telling you I'm having a hard time here. So I might need some space. My reaction, to something might not be as expected, or,
yeah.
because, I mean, we run into that all the time. Like, we'll see somebody or we'll interact with somebody, and you'll be like, what was wrong with them? Well, they might be
Right?
having a
Like, where
bad
did that come
day.
from? Yeah.
They might be having a bad day. They could be, I mean, and so I think it's different, different perspectives about how we process that. And
Mm,
for me, sometimes I just like to go out and take a walk. I like to get out in nature and just be and enjoy, or I like to spend time with the dogs or the
yeah.
family, because that's what repositions me. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's very key to understand for yourself what will ground you, what will help clear those things. And it
Mhm.
might be different at in different
Mhm.
seasons, right?
Yes.
And so,
Mhm.
maybe and I don't just mean the physical seasons, but whatever's going on in your life,
Yeah.
that will call for different things. And it can be easy to kind of fall into oh, this feels good and this feels good. And you try to do all of them, right? And then all of a sudden you're
Mhm.
like, that's like 4 hours of my day. I can't do
Yeah.
anything else. Um, and so, it's just a little bit of trial and error and figuring out like, hey, this feels good, or hey, this doesn't feel good anymore. That's okay. I'll put it on the shelf and I'll try
Mhm.
another tool. And we can grow in and out of those things. And I think acknowledging, I also lost my stepfather to
Mhm.
suicide.
Mhm.
And there is a real big issue on this with veterans, right?
Mhm.
And again, a
Mhm.
lot of that is tied to the loneliness, to the
Mhm.
isolation, to not being able to feel like they can express. And so it's important to acknowledge, in Australia, they have a campaign, it's okay to not be okay,
Yes. Mhm.
right? And so once we acknowledge, then we can start to go into, well, how can I choose something different? What else? What are my other options, right? But if we don't acknowledge something is there, we can't even begin to look at it
Yes.
and understand it. And
Right.
and sometimes it's not, I always urge people to, there's nothing wrong with you. It's not that we have to fix you or
Yeah.
fix something.
Mhm.
Your body is actually doing, your nervous system is doing exactly what it's designed to do,
Mhm.
right? When we're
Yeah.
in burnout, when we're in overwhelm, when we're having these depressive moments, it's designed to do that. It's a signal, right?
Yeah.
So that you can make some changes.
Right.
And so it's important to not numb out, to not ignore, to
Mhm.
not just try to, escape, the typical coping mechanisms.
Yeah.
And so I know you do a lot of work to advocate for veterans and military spouses, and you focus a lot on the suicide awareness and prevention. Can you
Mhm.
tell me a little bit more about that work and that impact?
Yes. So when I was in the department, I was an ambassador for the Prevents program, which was to prevent suicide, of course.
Mm,
And I've continued working. Prevents kind of moved into a different part and moved really back into internal VA world, but I still work with several people. And um, one of the groups that is starting out right now, it's been around for about a year, but it's just really starting to get its feet under it and develop, is called Face the Fight. And there's several organizations that are coming into that, and it's the Dole Foundation, several veteran service organizations, and it's all about coming together to face these challenges, whether it's military, whether it's first responder, whether it's just life, um,
mm,
and having people talk about what their life experiences have been around suicide. You know, excuse me. Unfortunately, it impacts 1 in 6, and I think that number is probably a little dated. I'd say it's probably a little bit higher than that. 1 out of 6 people are impacted by suicide. I think it's probably more. And
that's a lot.
talking, yeah, but talking about it and understanding that happens. And often I talk about this. When you have suicide in your family, you're a higher risk. It's just like heart disease and um, cancer, some cancers. That if you have that history in your family, that you might be at higher risk, and so you get treatment. You go see the doctor.
Mhm.
You talk about it. Well, mental health is another challenge, because when you have mental health challenges in your family, there can, not always, but there can be a higher risk for suicide, especially if there's been a suicide. And I didn't learn
Right.
that until after my brother's death, right? And so I know that, and my family knows that. And so, we just periodically check in with each other if we're going through a hard time, if we're, wondering about things, and how are we doing, checking in with ourselves. I mean, even,
Yeah.
writing the book, spent a lot of time alone writing the book.
Mm,
And there were times where I was like, you don't know what you're doing. The voice talks to you from your shoulder. And there was, a little bit of period there when I'm like, I don't think I have any business writing a book. I don't know what I'm doing. And a friend, it just so happened, a friend called me that day and said, "Hey, how's the book?" talk to me about it, right? They were checking in on me, right? Because they hadn't heard from me. So, and, my husband was traveling a lot for business at that time. And so I could go into a little bit of depression, and that's something that you have to know that can happen. And you have to know the warning signs and then say, okay, I need to put this down. I need to walk away. I need to take a breath. I need to do whatever, do something different to kind of get out of my funk, get out of this, whatever I'm in. And that's one of the things we talk about in some of these organizations where we talk about it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to talk about it. It's okay to say, I'm having a rough day today. And I need somebody to talk to, or reach out to a friend and say, hey, can I talk to you for 5 minutes? Because I just need some encouragement.
Yeah, that's powerful. And, it really is from an epigenetic standpoint, right? If it's running in the family, a lot of people kind of have rolled their eyes at that comment. It's very true, right? Not only it's a psychological and a genetic predisposition. And, obviously your environment plays into that. And so, we all have genes that could be expressed in a certain way, but then we live a life of, down this path and they never get expressed, right? You can have all the cancer markers and all the diabetes and everything, and never once have be like the most healthy person when you pass away at an old age, even though you were more predisposed, but you lived a certain lifestyle. The flip side is true. But when you do have those, if you're also in a very stressful environment, like a veteran has been, or, a employee who's been on the brink of burnout for many years and really just kind of dragging themselves through the mud, then that exacerbates that.
Yes.
And then of course they can start to present and flare up and become more of an issue. And of course it makes sense that if it's happened in the family, you not only you're predisposed to it, but now there's this connection piece there. And it's like, oh, all of a sudden that kind of activates like a match striking the fire. And so being aware of it and making it okay, being like, that's fine. That's what it is.
Right.
This is how we're going to make sure to put some boundaries around what we need as a person, what we need as a family, what we need as a company, right? All of those things translate no matter what area of life you're talking about. And so that's really valuable and impactful work. Thank you so much for doing that for
Yeah, it's really important to me. But this goes back to what we talked about being a human being. We all have our own DNA. We all are unique beings, and of course, environment and experiences impact that. But it still doesn't mean that we're the same as everybody else. Like you said with your golden rule issue, it's not that that's everybody's going to experience things different. And so one of the things I think that we are learning, and I think we have learned, and I think we're doing a better job of it, we still sometimes we do better than others, is understanding where that person's coming from and giving them the space to be who they are. Right. I mean, one of the things I've been told throughout my life is that I have an intense personality. And okay, yeah, I do. I am, right. But people, when and people will say, yeah, that's true. But then I'll say to people, but I'm an introvert, and they'll be like, what? They said, but you're so, and I said, yeah. I said, because the intenseness will take over, but then the other side of it,
the downswing.
Right, I'm exhausted. Right.
People don't talk about that downswing.
People don't talk about that, right? And so, and there's all sorts of different categories to put yourself in these days. You can call whatever. There's all the different studies, but it's how you choose to engage and what drives you and what brings resilience to you and how you recharge and how you, what drives you and what works to help you kind of maintain yourself, right?
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you. Where I want to ask you a couple questions, but what advice, before we get into those, what advice would you give for people right now who might be feeling a little bit alone? And where would you guide them to begin this journey of reconnecting to themselves and seeking assistance?
Well, I would think I would, kind of assess, why do you feel alone? Are you putting yourself alone? Are you making
Mm.
yourself alone? Are
Yeah,
you
we can certainly do that. I've done that before.
Yeah. Are you putting yourself in your house, in your apartment, whatever? Are you walling yourself off? That's the
Yeah.
first question. If you are, why? Right. That's the second question. So if you are, why are you doing that? What's happening in your world to make you
Mm.
do that? And then, okay, how do we change that? What do I need to make that different? What do I need? Do I need to, go to the local restaurant and have dinner by myself? Just even though there's people, because there'll be
Yeah.
other people around and I will engage with something. Do I need to just go walk down and go to the local gym or work out, or where you can engage with people? Where can I go
Yeah.
where I can engage with people? Right? Is that work? Is that the local mall, whatever, where people are, you're going to have some engagement, right?
Yeah.
And then, but also check in with your friends and your family. Like if you haven't talked to somebody for a while, pick up the phone, send an email, send a
Yeah.
chat, there's millions of other things. I mean, you can also, there's a lot of opportunities on virtual and chat and places like that. I mean, I think I would use those limiting, because I think,
Right.
sometimes when you're in that place, you kind of need that connection with people. But I would look for the places to connect with people and talk with people and just find those. But first, are you doing it to yourself? And if you are, why? And then
Yeah.
how do you, because it's about you, it's about your
Yeah.
attitude, your choice. This is your, what do well, I look different, or I'm not feeling good, or I'm like, okay, well, yeah, there are days that I don't want to work out. Today was one of them. So, and so I had to make a decision. Am I going to work out or am I not? Right.
Yeah.
It's a choice. Right. So that's how it works.
Great. Thank you.
Mhm.
So I always like to ask my guests what their superpower is, or if they have multiple. And so I would love to know what you believe your superpower to be.
Ooh, I think my superpower is really connecting people, like
Mm.
connecting people to each other. Over the years, I've just been able to kind of say, hey, you should talk to so and so. You should
Yeah.
go talk to here, and I've been able to bring people together, and I think that's a superpower, because I've been able to connect organizations and people to each other, and I did it professionally, I do it personally, and it just seems to be what I do. I mean, my husband teases me like I can't get in an Uber without having a conversation about
Yeah. I love that. You can learn a lot about talking to your Uber drivers.
you can, yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. I love that. Being a super connector is such a fun thing and is very valuable, and it requires being present in the moment. And so that shows
Mhm.
me that, you've really learned how to be present, which is a beautiful skill that many of us need to really start to be intentional with, right?
Mhm.
So I love that. My next question is around a board of directors. So, organizations have a board of directors,
Mhm.
but as individuals, we often have that also, whether we formally have thought about it that way or not. But this is a group of individuals in which you will reflect upon, or even interact with that person in order to gain a new perspective on something that you're going through. And so these could be people that you do actually know and you engage with, or it could be a fictional character, someone from the past, or a celebrity or someone that you maybe haven't met yet, but you really believe and buy into their philosophy and love how they approach things. So you'll often take that as a way to reflect upon your own life. Do you
Mhm.
have some notable people on your personal board of directors?
Well, I don't know if they're notable or not, but I have a
Yeah.
couple, and first it would probably be the men in my family. So my husband and my two sons. I have found that they all think differently. They also
Yeah.
all approach things differently. Two of the three are engineers,
Okay.
and the youngest is a golf professional. And so,
Nice.
but their insight and their perspective is different, and it's different about me, and
Mm,
it's different about my interaction. And so they'll
mm.
see things, and so sometimes I'll ask, and sometimes I don't ask. Can I get the information?
Yeah, yeah.
So that's probably they probably hold at the highest spot in the board of
Yeah.
directors. But then, I have a couple of good friends and who have been, I've worked colleagues who I've worked with as well as just friends who I will reach out and say, have I lost? Am I losing my focus here? Am I
Yeah.
going, the wrong way? And you know, they're pretty good about coming back and saying, yeah, okay, why don't you bring this back this way, or you need to do this, and but the other thing is, I've always been an avid reader.
Mm,
I read a lot. I mean, I didn't read a lot writing because I didn't want to muddy my brain. But
right.
I love to read different styles of books. I like a lot of autobiographies. I like leadership books. I like organizational books. I like all sorts. And so, sometimes I'll just go pick up a book and read it because I just want to take a break from thinking. And so
Yeah.
reading sometimes will give you that break or make you think about things differently.
Okay. I love that. Yes, I'm a big reader also, and they totally make you think differently. They give you just new opportunities to interact oftentimes with cultures or
Mhm.
places that you may not have traveled to yet or had the ability to go visit. Even, historical perspectives, all those kind of things. But
And
yes,
I have
reading.
one more that I
Okay.
just remembered.
Yes.
I love Dr. Seuss books.
Oh, yes. I was just looking at one I have on my shelf earlier.
I I have been like since I was a little girl. I was one of those that brought piles to read, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And as I got older and I read them to my kids, and then I just read them. I was like, wow, there's a lot of serious wisdom in these books. And so, I don't know about Theodore Geisel personally, but Dr.
Right.
Seuss
Right.
could be on my board of directors. Yeah.
Nice. I love that. Yeah, no, it's funny how, obviously as a child, that just goes over our head. And then we
Mhm.
go back and we're like, "Oh, yeah, wow." And so it's like dropping little seedlings in
Mhm.
for us as children. I used to read Aesop's Fables all the time.
Mhm.
But I love Dr. Seuss as well. And now every time I see there's this like fluffy tree, every time I
Mhm.
see it, I'm like, "Oh, it's like the Lorax."
Lorax
You
tree.
know?
That's right. It's the
Yeah.
Lorax tree. Yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
And my mom got me to try new foods as a kid
Mm.
by reading me Green Eggs and Ham.
Ah,
And
smart.
so
Yeah.
she would always encourage me, to at least try just like the book, and if I didn't like it, then I could get the other thing. And, of
Mhm.
course, I would end up liking a lot of the stuff. And so that's how
Mhm.
she helped me brought in,
Yep.
"No, I just want a hot dog," or whatever, a child I was saying at that time. But
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, those are great. And your husband and your sons, they are notable. And so I should have clarified notable meaning notable to you,
Oh,
not
okay.
to
Yes.
the world, right?
They're
Like
very notable to
notable
me.
that you want to share is
Yes.
is more the question. So thank you for that.
Mhm.
My final question is really geared for self-reflection,
Mhm.
and it is, how do you best represent humanity? And
Mhm.
it's under the context or the situation of another species, alien race has come to Earth, and you are the first human they meet. So what do they learn about humanity because they have met you?
But we're probably sincere that we're a mess, probably. um,
I think they've learned that no matter who they met.
yeah, I think, yeah, like this woman cannot operate a computer. Technology is not her thing. Um, I think that I would hope that they would hear from me that every being, because it really is every being, wants to matter and has a purpose. I mean, literally. I mean, you can study science till the cows come home, and everything that exists for a purpose.
Mm, absolutely.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
love that.
Mhm.
Amazing. Well, Shri, this has been just so awesome to reconnect again today and to share your story and to hopefully give some, powerful reframes for people so that they can see how they can make an impact, and it doesn't need to be a huge thing. It can start very small. So thank you for sharing your wisdom with us today.
Yep. Yep. It's been a pleasure, Sarah. It's always great. Think about dropping that pebble into the water. Think about it.
Yes. Exactly. Yeah, that ripple effect is so profound, and sometimes we don't get to enjoy or witness the ripple
Mhm.
effect, right? Like we will have impact whether we know about it or not.
Right.
And that is also important to remember. So thank you
It is.
for reminding us of that.
Yeah.
If people would like to connect with you, where's the best place for them to go?
Well, there's a couple places. So I'm very, as you know, I'm very prevalent on LinkedIn under
Mhm.
Sherry Perrins Cheryl Mason. You
Mhm.
can find me on LinkedIn. You can also find me at catalystleadershipmgmt.com, which is my website. So it's
Okay.
catalystleadershipmgmt.com.
I want to
And you can contact me there too.
Beautiful. I'm going to pop that up on the screen and we'll have that in the comments. We have some comments saying thank you for today's episode. It was a great discussion. So thank you for those of you who have joined us live. We always enjoy having the interaction with you and sharing our perspective. So thank you again for being with us, and we'll be back in the lounge next week. Stay tuned.